So I think with that, I wanted to build on Paul's overview of the main work streams of the LBMA and maybe share with you really what it's all about in terms of the mission, what drives us. And ultimately, it's all about adding value. So there's three things I wanted to talk about: engagement, transparency, and integrity. Because ultimately, it's integrity that we're driving for. So when it comes to engagement, we want to hear from every single one of you in this room. And we need your help reaching the people who aren't here. Specific groups for that are the regulators or potential regulators of the market, as well as clients of the market, central banks, investors, producers. We've spent a lot of time in the last 12 months focusing on engagement with the central banks, as well as producers. That's something we look to continue and to build on that momentum over the next year. We've worked hard for this conference to actually have a few side meetings focused on those groups to help answer questions they may have about the work we're doing, and again, to spread the good news. As Paul mentioned, we've done our first annual review. It went to the presses literally right before we got on the planes to come see you. You can get the digital version on the app. You can go see the team at the booth and get a hard copy if you are a bit more old school, not as environmentally friendly perhaps as Paul is. But please help us spread the word. Help get in touch with your governmental affairs people. Make sure you're taking part in trade reporting, because we need your engagement to help add that value to the entire precious metals industry. So speaking of engagement, you've had a lot of warnings about voting, so let's get started now. Here's just a prompt. So you have two ways. You can either go to the app if you've downloaded it. If you're saying to me, Ruth, I can't download your app, compliance won't let me, you can go to your browser directly at slido.com. So if you can do so now, we're going to open our first question and find out who's in the room right now. So again, it is all about diversity. We've had those events and had good feedback. So I'm hoping we've had a little bit of a change from last year. But if we can start the voting. It's usually overwhelmingly banks, but I'll be shocked if it changes. We'll see. Refiners. Okay. That is a real change, actually, to have more refiners in the room. Just keep shifting. Okay. Well, I think that is a surprise. Certainly year on year, usually the big line is a trading institution, so perhaps it's symptomatic of some of the changes happening in the market. The next question I have for you is, why are you here? So are you here for the wisdom emanating from the platform, for the networking opportunities, or because your boss forced you to come? For my team, so that we're clear, it's one or two. Please, have a vote. I think it's a little bit of a biased group because you're here in the room as opposed to maybe still either in bed or at breakfast, but we shall see. Okay. I'm glad the third option isn't pulling quite as high as perhaps I feared. Okay, wow, that says a lot. And then my final question for you, since we have the press in the room and you've all warmed up on voting, what's the gold price going to be next year? No silly responses, please. You got the direction right, at least last year. Maybe a little more bullish than the actual, but okay. Happy? As per usual, you've got to come back tomorrow to get the answer to that, I'm afraid, with or without a hangover, from what I'm sure will be a spectacular dinner brought to you by our sponsors at Metalore. So, before I get on to the integrity, I wanted to tell you a little story about me and how I came to be at the LBMA, for those of you who are maybe not familiar. I'm actually celebrating my 10-year anniversary since I came through the door as PA cover to the chief executive. I was doing a temp job. I was there for 3 months as maternity cover. And I frankly thought that bullion had something to do with soup, bouillon cubes, something to that extent. But when the recruiter called me on Friday and said it was 10 pounds an hour, I was there for Monday morning, 9 a.m. And I certainly never thought I'd be standing in front of you this morning. It's been an incredible and a wild ride. Well, what I would say, one of the reasons that I have been here for 10 years is because it's a very challenging and exciting job, but it's also rewarding because you can see the value that you're adding. It does make a difference to the people involved in the industry and ultimately the reputation of the industry itself. So when it comes to reputation, it's all about transparency. And as I said, we're trying to bring that transparency through when it comes to the people who are outside the room. We've had some really big wins this year. And certainly one thing that I didn't expect would happen 10 years ago is publishing the vault holdings for the first time. And what's interesting about that is it's not actually the people in the room that have changed. I was actually laughed out of the room when I proposed it 10 years ago. It's the commitment and the attitude has changed, that there's market commitment for transparency. And that's that great message that we need to get outside. So how much gold is there? I'm happy to say it's a lot. I think those of us who are involved in the day-to-day are not surprised by that. In terms of value, it's over 300 billion. In terms of weight, it's the gold and silver is the combined weight of the shard. If you were to stack the bars end to end, they would reach from London to the International Space Center. So there's a lot of metal, and that's important. It's also important that we put this out as a consistent data set. This isn't just a one-off sharing or a survey. This is now coming out each month on a consistent basis. And it brings that transparency that the regulators and that the clients of the market intend to see. And ultimately, that transparency helps us when we're trying to talk about integrity, because you need to see the evidence of that integrity. As Paul mentioned, we had another important moment this year when we launched the Precious Metals Code for the first time. The point of this is not that there was something untowards before. These are all high ethical standards that each and every one of you were doing. But what it's about is communicating to the outside world in a consistent manner that we have credibility, that we have high standards, and that there's market commitment to that. And that's a really important thing. Also, in terms of integrity, we have now had IBA take over the silver price. You have one administrator for both prices. And what's a game changer there is the clearing aspect. We've removed the credit barrier so that all of you, providing you meet those integrity requirements when it comes to controls, can take part directly in the auction for the first time. And this makes a big difference. So I'd really encourage you to engage. Go see Matt and his team during the coffee breaks. I know they're having presentations and they want to tell you the good news, so please go see them. The final thing I just wanted to stress was the trade reporting figures. I had a couple questions from the forum yesterday as to, Ruth, you're talking about trade reporting, but is this a survey? Is this a one-off? No, we're actually trying to go from behind the curve as a market itself and become much more transparent than some of the other markets out there. So we are talking all local London, all local Zurich, spot, forwards, and option trades. These are anonymized, I quickly add, because it does come down to client confidence and client protection. We've been through an enormous exercise within the banks proving that that's the case before they would even send anything across the line. But we need this information to help inform the regulators out there, specifically with our ongoing lobbying efforts on NSFR and Basel III. If you don't know, this can be really bad news for the market. And the consistent message that we've had really since we started the work in 2010 at this point, I remember David's remarks in Montreal trying to grab attention for this, is the lack of data. So that's something that has changed. We've had 77% of market makers across the line, but we need that engagement to continue. And we need you to help us get in touch with the right people within your organizations. Because ultimately, the LBMA adds value when we speak with one voice for the industry. Ultimately, we are trying to add value for you and make sure that that is clearly recognized externally. So my ask for you is to get involved. Don't let this be the last time we speak in Barcelona. Don't let the next time we speak be Boston. Get in touch with me. Either send us an email, fill out the survey, come see the booth, or just grab me for a cup of coffee. Don't let the conversation end now. Please engage and let us be your champion. With that, that's it for me. Please enjoy the rest of the conference. I'm going to turn it over now back to Paul, and I will see you throughout the next few days. Thank you.